Liam Whitmore, was born into a legacy of immense wealth. The heir of a family that had made its fortune in steel manufacturing during the early 20th century. From his earliest years, Liam was groomed to take over the family business, attending prestigious schools and mingling with the offspring of other influential families. But Liam's ambitions extended far beyond merely preserving his family's wealth. He wanted to create an empire of his own. At 25, freshly graduated from Stanford Business School, Liam made his first real estate investment, purchasing a dilapidated apartment complex in Miami. Where others saw decay, Liam saw potential. He renovated the building, raised the rents, and sold it for a significant profit. This approach became his standard. And over the next 3 decades, Liam transformed Whitmore Holdings into one of the largest property development companies on the East Coast. Liam's business acumen was matched only by his ruthlessness. He became known for his aggressive tactics, often acquiring smaller properties through a combination of generous offers and thinly veiled threats. His employees both feared and respected him, knowing that nothing short of perfection would be tolerated. As Liam's wealth grew, so did his appetite for the finer things in life. He collected rare art, drove the latest luxury cars, and divided his time between a penthouse in Manhattan and a private estate in the Hamptons. But despite all his success, Liam found himself increasingly lonely as he entered his 6th decade. His first marriage to Charlotte van der Berg ended in a bitter divorce after 10 years, with Charlotte citing Liam's workaholic tendencies and emotional distance as reasons for the split. A second marriage to former model Bianca Reyes lasted barely 2 years before ending in another costly divorce. After that, Liam swore off marriage, preferring instead to date a series of younger women who were drawn to his wealth and influence. It was during this period that Liam discovered the world of sugar dating. Here, he found an arrangement that suited him perfectly. Young, beautiful women willing to provide companionship and intimacy in exchange for financial support. Liam cycled through several sugar babies, never letting any of them get too close, always maintaining control of the relationship through his wealth. But as Liam approached his 60th birthday, he began to feel the weight of his years more acutely. He looked in the mirror and saw a man who had achieved everything he wanted professionally, but whose personal life was empty. He longed for a deeper connection, for someone who could make him feel young again. It was in this state of mind that Liam Whitmore first laid eyes on Isabella Moreau. The moment he saw her, young, beautiful, with a spark of ambition in her eyes, he knew he had to have her. What Liam didn't realize was that in pursuing Isabella, he was setting in motion a chain of events that would lead to his downfall and forever tarnish the Whitmore name he had worked so hard to elevate. Isabella Moreau's story began far from the glamour of New York City. In a small town in Louisiana, born to a struggling single mother, Isabella learned early on that life was rarely fair and that beauty could be both a blessing and a curse. Her mother worked as a cashier at a grocery store, barely making enough to keep a roof over their heads. Isabella's father had left before she was born, leaving behind nothing but a name on a birth certificate and a hole in Isabella's heart. Despite the challenges at home, Isabella excelled in school. She was bright and charismatic, with a natural talent for performance that made her the star of every school play. Her teachers saw potential in her, encouraging Isabella to dream big and aim for college. But as high school graduation approached, the harsh reality of their financial situation became clear. There was no money for college, no savings to fall back on. Determined to escape the cycle of poverty she had grown up in, Isabella made a bold decision. With nothing but a suitcase full of clothes and the money she had saved from her part-time job at the local diner, she boarded a bus to New York City, dreams of stardom filling her head. The Big Apple, however, proved to be far less welcoming than Isabella had imagined. She quickly discovered that thousands of other young women shared her dreams, all competing for the same limited opportunities. Isabella found work as a waitress, just like her mother. But the meager pay barely covered the rent for the tiny apartment she shared with two other aspiring actresses. As weeks turned into months with no big break in sight, Isabella's optimism began to fade. She was on the verge of giving up and returning to Louisiana when a chance encounter changed everything. At the upscale restaurant where she worked, Isabella served a table of young women who seemed to exude wealth and confidence. As she cleared their plates, she overheard them discussing their arrangements and the gifts they had received from their benefactors. Intrigued and desperate for a way out of her financial troubles, Isabella struck up a conversation with one of the women after her shift. The woman, Juliet, introduced Isabella to the world of sugar dating. She explained how young, attractive women could meet wealthy older men who would provide financial support in exchange for companionship. At first, Isabella was hesitant. It felt too much like the life her mother had lived, dependent on men for survival. But as Juliet showed her the designer clothes, the luxury apartments, and the opportunities that came with being a sugar baby, Isabella's reservations began to crumble. With Juliet's help, Isabella created a profile on an exclusive sugar dating website. She chose her most flattering photos, crafted a witty bio, and waited. Within days, her inbox was flooded with messages from potential benefactors. But one message stood out from the rest. An invitation to attend a charity gala as the guest of one Liam Whitmore. Little did Isabella know that accepting that invitation would set her on a path that would end in tragedy, forever altering the course of her young life. The hotel ballroom glittered with chandeliers and the jewels of New York's elite on the night Isabella Moreau and Liam Whitmore first met. Isabella, dressed in a borrowed gown and feeling out of her depth, scanned the room nervously until her eyes locked with those of a distinguished older man making his way toward her. "Mr. Whitmore, I presume?" Isabella's voice trembled slightly as she extended her hand. Liam took it, his grip firm and confident. "The pleasure is all mine, Miss Moreau." He guided her into the ballroom with a gentle hand on the small of her back, and Isabella felt a shiver run through her body. Whether from excitement or apprehension, she couldn't tell. As the evening progressed, Isabella found herself captivated by Liam. He was charming, witty, and seemed genuinely interested in her aspirations. When she mentioned her struggles to break into acting, Liam's eyes lit up. "I have connections in the industry," he said. "Perhaps I could make a few introductions." By the end of the night, Isabella's head was spinning, not just from the champagne, but from the possibilities Liam represented. When he invited her to dinner the following evening, she accepted without hesitation. Their courtship, if it could be called that, moved at a whirlwind pace. Liam wasted no time in showering Isabella with gifts and experiences she had only dreamed of. A week after their first meeting, he presented her with a key to a luxury apartment in Tribeca. "You need a proper place to live if you're going to pursue your career," he explained as Isabella stared in disbelief at the spacious, sunlit rooms. Designer clothes filled her new closet. A gleaming sports car sat in her designated parking spot. And Liam's black American Express card found its way into her wallet. For emergencies, Isabella felt as though she had stepped into a fairy tale, with Liam as her fairy godfather, granting her every wish. But fairy tales often have a dark side, and Isabella would soon discover the price of Liam's generosity. With each gift, each opportunity he provided, the invisible strings binding her to him grew stronger. Liam began to dictate her schedule, insisting she be available whenever he called. He questioned her friendships, particularly with young men, his jealousy thinly veiled behind concerns for her reputation. Isabella, intoxicated by her new lifestyle and grateful for Liam's support, initially brushed off these red flags. It wasn't until much later that she would realize the true cost of allowing Liam Whitmore into her life. For the first few months, Isabella Moreau felt as though she was living a dream. Liam Whitmore opened doors she never imagined possible. introducing her to influential people in the entertainment industry and funding her acting classes at a prestigious New York theatre school. Their first major trip together was to London, where Liam booked the royal suite at the Ritz. Isabella, who had never been outside of the United States, was overwhelmed by the luxury and history surrounding her. As they strolled along the Thames, Liam surprised her with a Cartier bracelet, deftly locking it around her wrist. "This is a symbol of our connection, my dear," he murmured, his eyes intense. "I hope you'll never take it off." From London, they jetted to the Seychelles, where they spent lazy days in an overwater bungalow. Isabella marveled at the crystal-clear waters and the schools of colorful fish swimming beneath their glass floor. In the evenings, as they dined on freshly caught seafood, Liam regaled her with stories of his business triumphs, and Isabella found herself drawn into his world of power and high-stakes negotiations. Back in New York, Isabella's transformation continued. Gone was the small-town girl from Louisiana. In her place stood a polished, sophisticated young woman who turned heads wherever she went. Liam delighted in showing her off at industry events, proudly introducing her as my Isabella to his colleagues and friends. She became a fixture on the social scene, her face appearing in society pages alongside other young, beautiful women who were also attached to wealthy older men. But as the months passed, Isabella began to feel a growing sense of unease. Liam's behavior, which she had initially found flattering, became increasingly possessive. He began dictating what she should wear, which roles she should audition for, and even whom she could associate with. If Isabella disagreed with him, Liam would grow cold and distant, his anger simmering just below the surface. When she tried to pull back, Liam tightened his grip, lavishing her with even more extravagant gifts as if to remind her of all he had given her. It was during one of these arguments that Isabella first saw a glimpse of the darkness within Liam, after she had turned down a role in a film that he had arranged for her, citing that it didn't align with her artistic vision. Liam exploded. He accused her of being ungrateful, of not understanding the opportunities he was providing. His voice, usually so controlled, dripped with venom. "You think you can make it without me?" he snarled, his face inches from hers. "You're nothing without me, Isabella. Remember that." Shaken, Isabella retreated into herself. The next morning, Liam apologized profusely, blaming his outburst on stress from a particularly difficult business deal. He promised to support her in whatever decisions she made. But Isabella couldn't shake the fear that had taken root in her heart. From that point on, their relationship became increasingly volatile. Liam's jealousy flared up more often, and Isabella found herself walking on eggshells, careful not to provoke his wrath. Yet, despite her growing discomfort, she couldn't bring herself to leave him. The lifestyle Liam provided had become a gilded cage, one she wasn't sure she could escape. Then came the night that would change everything. It was a cold, rainy evening in late November when Liam invited Isabella to his penthouse for what he described as a special dinner. When she arrived, she found Liam in an unusually good mood. A bottle of vintage champagne already open on the table. They toasted to her latest audition, one that, unbeknownst to Isabella, Liam had ensured she would land. After dinner, Liam took her by the hand and led her to the living room, where a small, elegantly wrapped box sat on the coffee table. "Open it," he urged, his eyes gleaming. Isabella's fingers trembled as she untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside was a diamond necklace, its stones so large and flawless that they seemed to catch every light in the room. "It's beautiful," she whispered, but there was a note of hesitation in her voice. "Only the best for you, my dear," Liam said, taking the necklace from the box and fastening it around her neck. His hands lingered on her shoulders, his fingers digging slightly into her skin. "You know what this means, don't you?" he asked softly. Isabella turned to face him, her heart pounding. "What do you mean?" It means you're mine, Isabella. Completely and utterly mine. As he pulled her into an embrace, Isabella felt a chill run down her spine. The necklace, so beautiful moments ago, now felt like a chain binding her to him. And for the first time, she realized just how dangerous Liam Whitmore could be. But Isabella was not one to surrender easily. That night, as she lay awake beside him, she began to formulate a plan to escape from Liam's control. She would need to be careful, to bide her time. But Isabella was determined to reclaim her freedom, no matter the cost. In the weeks following the night of the diamond necklace, Isabella became increasingly distant from Liam. She continued to play the role of the doting companion, attending events by his side and accepting his lavish gifts with a grateful smile. But inside, she was plotting her escape. She knew that she couldn't simply walk away. Liam had too much control over her life. Instead, she needed to create a situation where leaving him would seem like his decision. To do this, Isabella began to subtly undermine their relationship. She would flirt with other men at parties, knowing it would ignite Liam's jealousy. She started turning down more of his opportunities, insisting that she wanted to pursue her acting career on her terms. And she began to withdraw emotionally, making Liam feel increasingly isolated. At the same time, Isabella started quietly reaching out to contacts she had made in the industry, looking for a way to support herself without Liam's help. It wasn't easy. Many of the people she had met were more interested in her connection to Liam than in her talents. But eventually, she found an agent willing to take her on based on her potential rather than her current status. With her escape plan in motion, Isabella began planting the seeds of doubt in Liam's mind. She would drop hints that she was unhappy, that she felt trapped in their relationship. She made sure that these conversations happened when Liam was already stressed or angry, amplifying his feelings of insecurity. The turning point came when Isabella arranged to meet with a director who was interested in casting her in an independent film. She knew Liam would disapprove of the project. The film was low budget, gritty, and far removed from the glamorous roles he envisioned for her. But she accepted the meeting anyway. Then, she made sure that Liam found out about it. When he confronted her, Isabella played the role of the misunderstood artist, insisting that this was the kind of work she wanted to do, that she couldn't be happy just being his arm candy. Liam's reaction was explosive. Just as she had expected, he accused her of being ungrateful, of not appreciating everything he had done for her. In the midst of the argument, Isabella delivered the final blow. She told Liam that she needed space, that she wasn't sure if their relationship was what she wanted anymore. Liam's face turned pale, and for a moment, Isabella thought he might strike her. But instead, he simply walked away, his silence more frightening than any outburst. Over the next few days, Isabella made herself scarce. She didn't return Liam's calls or texts. And when they did speak, she was cold and distant. Liam, unused to being rejected, became increasingly desperate to win her back. He sent her flowers, expensive gifts, even a handwritten letter apologizing for his behavior. But Isabella remained resolute. She knew that Liam's pride wouldn't allow him to chase her forever. And she was right. A week later, Liam called her and, with a voice full of barely concealed anger, told her that perhaps they should take a break. Isabella agreed, her heart pounding with relief. She had done it. She was free. Or so she thought. The days following their breakup were a whirlwind for Isabella. She moved out of the Tribeca apartment, leaving behind the gifts Liam had given her as a final act of defiance. She rented a small studio in Brooklyn, far from the glitz and glamour of Manhattan, and threw herself into her work. The independent film she had agreed to do began shooting. And for the first time in months, Isabella felt like she was taking control of her life. But Liam Whitmore was not a man who took rejection lightly. At first, Isabella noticed small things. Roles she was up for would suddenly go to other actresses. Meetings with industry contacts would be cancelled without explanation. Then, her new agent dropped her, citing personal reasons that he refused to elaborate on. Isabella suspected that Liam was behind these setbacks. But without proof, she could do nothing. She tried to press on. But the more she fought, the more it seemed like the world was closing in on her. Then came the letters. Anonymous notes slipped under her door or sent to her new address, all containing veiled threats and warnings. One day, she found her car's tires slashed. A clear message that she was being watched. Fear began to consume her. But Isabella refused to be intimidated. She changed her phone number, installed security cameras, and even considered going to the police. But she knew that with Liam's connections, it would be her word against his. As the harassment escalated, Isabella's resolve began to crumble. She had underestimated Liam's capacity for vengeance. And now she was paying the price. She became paranoid, seeing shadows in every corner, jumping at every unexpected noise. Her performance in the film suffered. And the director, once so enthusiastic about her potential, began to lose faith in her abilities. Desperate, Isabella reached out to Juliet, the woman who had introduced her to sugar dating. Juliet, now living in Los Angeles with a new benefactor, listened sympathetically but offered little comfort. Liam's a powerful man. Isabella, she said, you should have known better than to cross him. But Isabella couldn't accept that. She had fought too hard to escape her past, to build a life for herself. And she wasn't going to let Liam destroy it. In a last-ditch effort to take control, Isabella decided to confront Liam directly. She arranged to meet him at a public place, hoping that the presence of others would keep him in check. When they met, Liam was cold and distant, a far cry from the man who had once lavished her with attention and gifts. I know what you've been doing, Isabella said, her voice trembling with anger. You need to stop. Liam. I'm not afraid of you. Liam simply smiled, a chilling expression that sent a shiver down Isabella's spine. You should be, he replied softly. You have no idea what I'm capable of. With that, he stood up and walked away, leaving Isabella alone at the table, her hands shaking. That night, as she returned to her apartment, Isabella found the door slightly ajar. Panic surged through her as she pushed it open, only to find the place ransacked. Everything of value was gone. But it was the message scrawled on the wall in red paint that made her blood run cold. You're mine. Forever. Isabella knew then that she could never truly escape Liam Whitmore. He would haunt her every step, sabotage every chance she had at happiness. She had won her freedom, but at a cost she had never anticipated. And as she stared at the chilling message on her wall, Isabella realized that her only chance at survival might be to disappear completely, to leave behind the life she had fought so hard to build and start anew, somewhere far away where Liam could never find her. But deep down, she knew that no matter where she went, Liam would always be a shadow in her life, a constant reminder of the price she had paid for her freedom. As Isabella faced escalating harassment from Liam, she found herself growing increasingly desperate. She had tried to confront him, but he had only responded with chilling threats. Her life had become a series of anxious days and sleepless nights, with each new incident adding to her sense of dread. One particularly bleak evening, after discovering her apartment had been broken into again, Isabella reached her breaking point. She decided it was time to confront Liam one last time. With the threats and harassment reaching a boiling point, she resolved to meet him in person and make it clear that she was done with his games. She arranged to meet Liam at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Brooklyn, a place where they had once gone to enjoy a rare moment of privacy away from the public eye. She hoped the location's isolation would ensure they could talk without interruption. But as she approached, Isabella couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a trap. When she arrived, Liam was already there, his face obscured by the shadows. He was calm, almost eerily so. As he greeted her, Isabella, he said. His voice smooth but laced with menace. I see you've come to make your final stand. I'm done with you. Liam, Isabella said. Her voice trembling but resolute. I won't let you control me any longer. Liam's expression darkened. You should have known better than to defy me. You've made this so much harder for yourself. Before Isabella could react, Liam lunged at her, pinning her against the wall. In a swift, brutal movement, he drew a knife from his coat pocket. Isabella's heart raced as she struggled against his grip. But Liam's strength was overwhelming. You had to make things difficult. Liam hissed, pressing the cold steel of the knife against her throat. You should have stayed where I put you. Isabella's eyes widened in terror. Desperate, she managed to twist her body just enough to catch a glimpse of a rusty pipe lying on the floor. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, she reached for it and swung it with all her might, catching Liam off guard. He staggered back, momentarily dazed. But Liam was not easily deterred. He recovered quickly and charged at her again. In the struggle, the knife fell from his hand, clattering onto the concrete floor. Isabella grabbed the opportunity, wrenching the knife away and plunging it into Liam's side. The impact was met with a chilling silence as Liam's eyes widened in shock. He staggered, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Before collapsing onto the ground, Isabella stood over him, her hands shaking uncontrollably as she looked down at the man who had tormented her for so long. In his final moments, Liam's expression was one of disbelief and fury. You can't escape me, he gasped, his voice fading. I'll always be. His words trailed off as the life drained from him. The warehouse was filled with an eerie quiet, broken only by Isabella's ragged breaths. As she stood over the body of the man who had tried to control and destroy her, Isabella felt a complex mixture of relief and horror. She had finally ended the nightmare. But at what cost? The weight of her actions sank in. And she knew that this was only the beginning of a new struggle. One to escape the shadows of her past and build a life free from Liam's influence. As dawn approached, Isabella fled the scene, leaving behind the evidence of her desperate fight. She knew that her freedom had come at a grave price, and the road ahead would be fraught with its own challenges. But for the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope that she might finally be able to reclaim her life and find peace.